Welcome to Inside Scoop Live, the podcast where indie authors get personal, sharing insights about their books, their writing journeys, and their passions. I'm your host, Sherry Hoyt, and I invite you to join me for engaging conversations with both debut indie authors and seasoned veterans. Whether you're looking for your next great read or a bit of inspiration, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Christophe Glasl joins the show today to talk about his book, Special Operations Group. It's a gripping first-hand account of life inside one of Australia's most specialized police units. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on the author. Christophe Glasl joined Victoria Police at age 19 with one goal in mind: to become part of the Special Operations Group. After completing one of the toughest training programs in law enforcement, he served in the unit from 1994 to 1998. He now shares his experiences to shed light on the realities and pressures of serving in an elite police unit. To learn more about Christophe's story, check out his book, Special Operations Group, available through major booksellers. Well, hi, Christophe. Welcome to Inside Scoop Live.
Thanks, Sherry. Thank you very much for having me.
What inspired you to write Special Operations Group, and what finally pushed you to share your story publicly after so many years?
The reason I decided to write the book, I never intended to get to the stage of having the book published. I was having a lot of issues with drug use and alcohol use in regards to old wounds that were brought up at the SOG. I was bullied quite relentlessly as a young child when I first came to Australia, bashed in the street by the teenagers. And so I grew up with a lot of childhood trauma, I guess, and going to the SOG, I thought that would be just a huge brotherhood, such a tight camaraderie, a bit like a football team, I guess. And it just wasn't that. There were so many different cliques within the group. You know, there was probably 30 or 40 members there when I was there, and up to half a dozen different cliques. And the bullying and bastardisation that occurred up there, not just with me, but with other people, and just opened up old wounds, my childhood. And I started smoking marijuana on and off very early in my career. And I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. In hindsight, obviously I was, but it wasn't an addiction at that stage, but it sort of grew into one. And the SOG sort of lit a fire and accelerated that. And I began abusing drugs quite regularly. And alcohol ended up being my biggest enemy, I guess, because I decided that I needed to get off the drugs. And being the sharp mind that I was, I thought, I'll just replace that with alcohol until I'm over the withdrawals from the other drugs that I was taking. And before I knew it, I was addicted to the alcohol and became such an issue. I left the job in 2000, but the alcoholism still continued. And it got to a stage where, everybody was saying, get some help. And I refused. I thought, no, I know what people are going to say. I know what I have to do. I just have to do it. But I couldn't do it on my own. So it got to the stage where I had to admit myself into rehab. And I did rehab 3 times over, I think, the course of 3 years, and relapsed every time I got out. And in rehab, we were taught to journal our thoughts and put them down on paper. So I just decided to start journaling, because I was having a lot of nightmares about the SOG. It was never about being in the blue uniform. When I was in the police force, the nightmares were always about the SOG. And so I just started journaling, and it just sort of morphed from there. And I was introduced to another author who gave me some advice and said, look, you should get this published. And yeah, so it just went from there. It just went from basically diary entries to journaling to structure in the book. And look, it wasn't a short journey, Sherry. It took me about 6 years to write it. I was one that I couldn't just sit down on the computer every day and just do some writing. I had to be in the mood to do it. There were many, many times where I thought, I'm going to do some writing today. And I sat down on the computer, and after 2 minutes, it was like, no, I can't do this today.
Yeah.
So, there were periods of 6 months or more where I just wouldn't even touch the book. And then eventually I got it published by Hachette, and then the shit hit the fan. I warned Hachette. I said, look, Victoria Police are going to come out and criticise this. And they did in a big way, much bigger than what I thought, to the point where Hachette had to withdraw the book to save their reputation. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to say anything because Hachette put me on a media ban. And so there was another 12-month fight there for me to get the rights to the book back to myself, which I did. And it took probably another 12 months or so to finally get it published through Tellwell as a self-published edition. So that's where it's at the moment. And as I said, I never intended to have it published, but it got to the stage where I thought, yeah, I think people need to know about this, because there's a lot of reports out there with special operations group forces or special forces where drug taking is rife. And it's because of the environment that we work in. It's a method of coping with these high pressure situations that we're faced with every day at work. So, it just made me more determined when the criticism came up from Victoria Police. And one ex-member of the SOG in particular, he actually warned me. He said, if you say anything bad about the Special Operations Group, he said, I will make it my mission to destroy that book, which he basically did. The criticism that was levelled at me and the lies that were levelled at me just made me more determined, and I was never going to give in. It was like when I was at the SOG, being bullied and bastardisation pretty well the whole time I was there. And, there were other members there that left because of it. And I just thought, you know what? No, fuck you. I'm not leaving. I've worked my ass off to get here, and I'm going to stay here. One, because I've worked my ass off to get here, and two, because now I'm going to give you guys the shits. So sort of return it in a way, I guess you could say. But I just thought the book needed to be out there. If it can help one person and that's going through or went through the same thing as I did, it'll be worth it. It's never been about the money, Sherry, and don't expect to make $1 million out of it. It was just more about getting my story out there and having people understand what members of these special units go through.
Right. You joined the Victoria Police at an early age with the goal of becoming a part of the Special Operations Group. How did it differ once you got there from your perception of what you thought it would be like?
It was a total different environment that I was expecting. As I said in the last question, I thought it would be like a tight-knit unit. You're going out and putting basically your life on the line with every single job you're going to. And look, when it came down to doing a job, it was a tight unit. Everybody had everybody's back. We had to. Even if I hated the guy that I was working with, I would have his back and he would have mine. But at the end of the job, you could end up being in a punch-up in a locker room afterwards. That's just how it was. And if you put 1 foot wrong in the job, even at training, you were just ostracised, criticised, screamed at, finger pointing in the chest. And that just wasn't me. I hated that, absolutely hated that. I'll be honest with you, Sherry, I think I was actually too nice a person to be up there. There was that much male testosterone floating around. It was just crazy. And I'm not saying everybody was like that. It was only a handful, maybe 20% of the people up there that made life difficult for everybody else. And
that's all it takes, right?
And politics, it was ridiculous. And there were other nice people up there too, like me, who copped the same criticism as well. And in hindsight, I probably should have stood up for myself a little bit more than what I did. But I did in the end, towards the end. It just got to the point where I'd had enough of it and I fought back. But it eventually got to the stage where I had to get out of there. I couldn't stay any longer.
Yeah. You give readers an inside look at an organization that's defined by the toughness and the discipline and the loyalty, but there's also moments of conflict and disappointment. You mentioned a few of those. How did you navigate that tension between the pride involved in your role and the disillusionment that came with some of the things you witnessed?
It was a difficult one, Sherry. It was a fine balance. I didn't think at the time it was, but in hindsight, my work was affected by my drug take and my alcohol use. My alcohol use at that stage was okay. It was more the drug use. My alcohol use came later, well after I left the job. But the drug taking became worse and worse. There were times when I was at home on call, when I was taking drugs at home while I was on call. I remember one time I got called at the office. I'd been smoking marijuana all night, and I rocked up, and one of the guys just looked at me and said, "Jesus, you look like shit, Chris. Have you just woken up?" And I said, yeah, I did. And there were other members that I found out later said, we could smell it on you. But nobody ever approached me and tried to offer me help. So it was all just swept under the rug. So how did I deal with it? Look, I am a very determined person. If I put my mind to something, I do it. And I tried to switch off from these people and deal with the people that I did get along with there. And like I said, as we got together for jobs, it was a tight-knit unit. And so during the jobs, I just concentrated on trying to get the job done. It was just a real difficult situation. And look, I put up with it I was there for 4 years, and they broke me in the end. I was broken in the end. So that's why I left. And basically, that's what I lost the love of the job as well. And so I left. I went to another unit for 2 more years, but then my drug taking there even got worse and worse. So I eventually sat down with my boss at the end of my tenure there and said, look, this is a situation. I need to resign. I can't do this job anymore. I'm going to be a danger to myself and to the people I'm working with, and I have to get out for my mental health. I've tried my hardest for a long time, Sherry, but eventually the pressure just broke me down.
Right. How hard was it to share in your book the side of your story relating to the alcohol and drug abuse?
That was actually easy. Look, I was just trying to be honest in the book, as honest as I possibly could. And as I said, if one person can pick up that book and realize that they're reading about themselves and get the help that I've been getting, it's still a struggle. I won't lie to you, Sherry. It's still a
Yeah.
struggle. But the writing of it and sharing of it was easy. And it's not just all about the SOG. There's stories in there about my life, my upbringing, certain trauma that I went through as a child growing up. And there's other stories about my rehab, going into rehab. So it's basically my life journey in there.
Okay.
Look, it is about the SOG, but the other chapters in there about my personal life tie it all together about how I eventually became addicted to the drugs. They're all trauma building events that happen in not just in my life. Everybody has them. Everybody has
Right.
them. I'm not the lone wolf in that regard. So, but yeah, look, writing about it was easy. I've got to the stage now, Sherry, I'm nearly 60 now, and I don't care what other people think of me anymore. And
Yeah.
all I wanted to do is help other people. It sounds like a cliche, I know that does, but that's really what I want. When the initial book was taken off the shelves, the amount of people that contact me, people that I'd never met before, spoken to before, contacting me on social media with their support, ex-members of the Victoria Police Force, current members, detectives, ex-members of the Special Operations Group, undercover operatives contacted me, and all people that have had dealings with the SOG. And so they knew what I'd written about was the truth, and they gave me their stories, and it was almost overwhelming. Geez, I'm getting a little bit emotional now, to be honest with you, Sherry, just thinking about it, it was it really was a very humbling experience, and a
Right.
lot of these people offered their support, and I'm still in contact with them, and I'm very grateful for them because they gave me that extra little motivation to keep going.
So, how long ago was your book first published with Hatchet?
I think it was 2023, I think it was.
Oh, okay. Just trying to get a sense of the timeline there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was around about 2023, and it was the chapter on Port Arthur that caused the most controversy. So that chapter, the way I wrote it in hindsight, I probably should have written it differently because the chapter that I wrote in the book with Hachette gave the impression that I was actually there, and I wasn't there. I was actually on call that night, but I wasn't called in. First time in the history of the SOG that I understand where somebody's on call and wasn't called into a job. So
Hmm.
I've rewritten that chapter to reflect exactly what's happened, and it'll be interesting to see what Victoria Police come and say about that chapter now because it actually puts him, I think, in a worse light. It's now 100% accurate, and if they want to come out and criticise it, please come out and criticise it because I've got no qualms about answering any questions in relation to it now.
Many people picture elite police units such as the SOG as flawless and, really invincible.
Hmm.
What do you want readers to understand about the human cost of that kind of environment?
Well, that's the exact word, human. We are human. I mean, here in Victoria Police, it's an acronym for Sons of God. That's
Mm.
what they call us, Sons of God. And before I joined the SOG, you'd look at these guys, if and when you saw them walking around in their black uniforms, all tooled up and everything, it was like, oh my God, these guys are just absolutely invincible. These blokes are God. But
Mm.
the bottom line is we're still human. We still have emotions. We still have incidents that affect us mentally and emotionally. And we take those home with us. Some people obviously deal with things a lot better than others. And I thought I dealt with them pretty well, but in the end, I knew I didn't. So You can be tough as nails at work, but you can be emotional train wrecks at home. And it's got a huge mental cost. And I just found that Victoria Police didn't have the support for the members there.
Oh,
Access.
the mental health support.
Yeah, the mental health support. I don't think anybody ever thought about the mental side of things. Yes, we did have a police psychologist, but it should have been a compulsory thing to go and see a police psychologist every now and then. I know the ambulance service here in Victoria, if they go to a high mental risk incident, I guess you might call it, they have to go and see a psychologist in regards to that incident. And that just wasn't the case at the SOG. And I believe there's still not a lot of support within Victoria Police. I still have contacts within there, and there's still bullying going on, and it's all still swept under the carpet. And nothing really has changed as far as I'm aware. So that's the sad thing. 30
Yeah.
years later, it's still going on. It's just ridiculous. And I know for a fact that if they can get 10 years out of a member now within Victoria Police, they're happy. The amount of people going out on mental stress and into early retirement or ill health retirement after 10 years is incredible. It's actually quite sad.
Yeah, it's got to be tough enough from just the job alone without internal circumstances aiding that kind of thing.
Yeah, Sherry, I actually never found the job itself to be that mentally inhibiting to me. It was the internal politics and the bullying that was the hard thing for me. The job itself was a job. And yeah, there were a couple of jobs that did affect me. But overall, it was the mental side of things within the internal politics.
Okay. Was there one mission or moment that still kind of replays itself in your mind?
The one that really affected me probably the most emotionally, and I still think about it now, and I still have this image in my mind, was in a chapter called Triple Murder, where we were flown up to Mildura, which is a long way away from Melbourne. It's about a 7 or 8 hour drive by car from Melbourne. So we flew up there in the police helicopter to find this guy who'd shot 3 people on 2 separate farms up at Mildura. And I remember we were clearing one of the houses, and just the image of one of the guys that was murdered. And I still can't work this out, Sherry. He was in the corner of the lounge room and he was still standing up. He was shot in the chest. He was still standing up in the corner of the lounge room, and he still had grasped in his hand this steel statue. It was about probably 10 inches, I guess, in height, but quite a big, solid statue. And he was still holding that in his hands. You hear about that saying, frozen in fear.
Yeah.
And that's what must have happened to him. And I can only imagine his final moments. He's in desperation grabbed this statue to try to save himself. And, he was just blasted to death. And just the image of him just still standing there in the corner, how I still can't work out how he was still standing up after being shot in the chest. I know he was propped up in the corner of the wall, but that one still affects me. And I remember after we'd cleared the house, we went outside to regroup and replan. And I turned around to the guy next to me. It was still dark at this stage and it was on farmland, so there was quite a bit of bush around as well. And I turned around to the guy that I was standing next to and I said to him, if this offender walks out of this bush now, I don't care if he's waving a white flag with his hands in the air, he's going down. And I had no doubt in my mind, I was that emotionally affected and angry that if he had walked out and surrendered, I would have shot
Yeah.
him. I've got no doubt about that. And the guy I was working with just looked at me and he just nodded his head and said, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, thank God that didn't happen. I mean, the coward was eventually found. He killed himself with the same gun. So he took the easy way out. So that situation never happened. But I'm sure it would have if he had walked out of that bush. That's how affected I was.
Wow. I can imagine, because I can picture it clearly just from your description. So I can imagine actually seeing it, how it would stay with you.
Yeah, it was a very, very, very sad image. It's sad. That's one, probably it is the saddest thing that I've ever seen in my time in Victoria Police and the Special Operations Group for sure.
You mentioned still having nightmares years later. What does recovery look like for you now? And how do you deal with the nightmares?
I haven't had a nightmare about the SOG for a long time. Sherry,
Mm.
before we started this interview, I actually mentioned I did have a nightmare last night, but it wasn't about the SOG. I can't specifically remember what it was about. I just actually remember waking up screaming, so, which I have done in the past quite regularly. Look, I'm older, I'm wiser. I don't worry too much what other people think of me anymore, but it's still a constant
Yeah.
daily work routine that I have to do on myself. I try to stay in a routine. I work best on a routine. Once I fall out of that routine is when I fall off the wagon.
Mm.
So I try and keep myself busy, really busy. I'm up at 4 o'clock every morning. I start work at 5. I've got another business I'm trying to get up and running. I've got the book going.
Yeah.
I've got my beautiful dog here who is an absolute lifesaver for me. She comes to work with me every day, which is fantastic. There was a lot of red tape because I do deliveries now. It sounds boring, and it probably is, but I love my job, the autonomy of it. You're not bothered. I go into work, I grab the truck. I don't even have to say hello to anybody. I go out, do my deliveries, and then knock off. And I went through a lot of red tape for getting permission to have my dog with me. And apparently I'm the only driver in Australia that's allowed to have their dog with them at work. Going back on how I'm dealing with it, I deal with it through positive outlook, meditation. I've got my psychologist that I still go and see on a regular basis, my GP, my doctor as well. And I just have to be honest and open about how I'm feeling within myself. And if I need to get help, well, I'll go and get the help. Where previously within the SOG and within Victoria Police, I didn't do that. I should have sought help while I was at the SOG, and I could have possibly had a much longer and successful career. There's no regrets. I can't have regrets, Sherry.
Yeah.
It's a matter of just moving forward. It is what it is. It's happened. These are things I did at the time, and I've actually got to the stage now where I've said to my psychologist, I need to try some hypnotherapy to try and stop my drinking completely, because I do go through stages where things get back to me and haunt me, and I can be fine for 3, 4, 5 months, and then something will happen that will trigger me, and I'll hit the bottle again for a number of days.
Yeah.
So I'm in the process of doing that one at the moment. It's always constantly evolving how you try and deal with your mental health.
Yeah.
It's not something that's ever going to go away. It's a bit like the depression. There's no cure for it. It's just a matter of just working at it and keeping working at it. And it's tough. It does. It takes a toll after a long time. But what's the alternative?
Right.
You fight, or eventually I give in and keep drinking, and within a few years I could be dead. So it's a
Right.
matter of
Yeah.
fighting. I don't want to die, Sherry. I do love life. I do love life. And I've got an absolute loyal, beautiful group of friends, which has shrunk over the years, because when you're in this situation, you find out who your true friends really are. But the friends I've got now are a huge support. And because of them, and because of life itself, I do love it. And I don't want to walk into an early grave.
Well, it's a work in progress, right? Right.
Exactly. And it always will be, Sherry.
What would you want young officers to know about protecting their mental health and integrity in high pressure roles like the SOG?
there's a very simple answer to that, is don't go there. Look, the other one is, if you find you're having problems with your mental health, don't be afraid to seek help. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and it actually takes a stronger person to seek that help. It's very easy to avoid it, and it's very difficult to go and accept it. So be honest and open with your own feelings and how you are, and go and seek the help, because
Yeah.
mental health is a huge thing, and you need to look after your mental health. If you don't, you're going to end up like me, and that's what you don't want. So put it this way, you will not be criticised for seeking help. You will not be
Right.
criticised for it. So,
Right. For
yeah,
sure. Well, Chris, is there anything else you wanted to add today?
I think you've covered a lot of it. Look, I just hope that the book does help somebody. I would love to hear from people who have read the book. If people listen to this podcast and they do read the book, let me know what you think. If you've got mental health problems, or you're struggling with anything in life, I can point you in the right direction and give you the support that you need to try and get yourself better.
Okay.
That's really all I can say. Look, Cherie, I love the SOG. I always will love the SOG. I did love my time there, and I'm very proud of the fact, and I always will be proud of the fact that I got there. No one can take that away from me, but it was just some of the people up there and the culture up there that was the thing that I hated. But the role of the SOG and the job that they do you can't take that away. I'm very proud of that fact and always will be.
Right. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for sharing a little bit about yourself and your work and your book. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining me today for my interview with Christophe Glasl, author of Special Operations Group. To learn more about Christophe's story, check out his book, Special Operations Group, available through major booksellers. And be sure to check out our other interviews at InsideScoopLive.com.